Glassimations came about because I knew Lienors Torre and knew that she was studying for her PhD in animation, but she had a long history of glassworking, and she's a master cold worker, and she's taught at Pilchuck a couple of times, and I always thought it was curious that she was getting a PhD in animation, and I wondered about the connection, and I wondered if she was exploring the connection.
Glass and animation are both very special media. They're relatively new in the way they're dealt with in the modern world, thinking about studio glass and then animation in general. Both of them capture light in beautiful ways.
It's always kind of interested me that most of the original animations were on glass cells, glass slides, and now that we're taught at glass, projecting onto glass again, I think that's a nice little loop back to history almost.
It was really nice to see people exploring objects and then putting this other, ephemeral material into something either hollow or solid. And so you change the object. The object no longer is the object, but the animation no longer is the animation. So together they become something different. And I guess that's where the fascination lies.
Well, I started off trying to think of how to include video with glass. And I found what happened is I started to think of the glass component and the shadow that it was casting and the light that was being projected as one object rather than the light being separate from the glass. So just started to play with the shadow and how things were moving through it, and really simple forms, and it's all just kind of a test.
For these kinds of classes, you tend to get really interesting people, really talented people who have an interest in doing something that's never been done before. They're not just seeking skills, they're really looking for a way to grow themselves, a way to evolve their own processes and techniques.
I built the cozy glass fireplace and I wanted to animate it with a warm flickering flame. I actually had some little scraps of red and gold candy wrappers, a bit of ribbon that I found, some little flecks of red cellophane, some beach glass that I brought from Victoria, and some cutout logs that I made from cardboard, and used those as my props for animation.
This is made with lamp-working glass, which I borrowed from the shop because I wanted to animate glass as well as animating on glass. And I'm manipulating it with my hands. Never having lamp worked in my life, I don't know how they do manipulate it really, but I'm twisting it because I've seen people twist. and I was interested in the way in which the glass throws the form and the colour of the hand and fingers from place to place. I was more interested in the planes and the way in which they threw the light than how they contained it. I expected they would contain it, but in fact they throw it better.
Animation, there's the Norman McLaren quote where he talks about the spaces between the frames as being more important than the actual drawings that happen on the frames. And that's very much why animation is quite special in some ways. That intangibility, to try and then bring it back into the glass as a way of giving it context in the world, is quite an interesting thing to think about.
I cut a bunch of sheet glass, and then I practiced on the lathe to get a wood grain pattern in the sheet glass, and then I fabricated that using just an epoxy to create a drawer. And then I sandblasted that with architectural features to sort of reference maybe alternate sort of domestic spaces. And then I kiln cast a bed. It's all sort of related to sort of a childhood memory of an encounter with a ghost.
So for this project, I was looking to try to have an animation and a built object that reflected a domestic scene, but also reflected sort of almost an Eastern European fairy tale aesthetic. And one of the ways that I tried to get that was through layering and through using light and diffuse light, and having these pieces be kind of in a sense naive, but also to use them together in a way that they would speak to each other and create just a view, a format, a vista, I guess, that you could look at and that you could sort of take into childhood, but also into sort of this nostalgic, old-fashioned feeling. With the animation, I think I did 2 animations, and both of them involved having birds fly through. I think that one of the things with the paper cut is, when we've been talking about this, is that it does have a bit of a clunky feel to it, but also a bit of a, you know, you get this sort of naive feel to it, but it has a comic feel as well, and I think that's something that you get naturally from the way that this stop animation works.
Glass, if it's treated a certain way, makes a perfect receptacle for light, and projected light is an obvious, you know, another kind of wonderful light. And then if you add moving light or animation, you get something even more possibly magical.
So my process for this project was, Lienor asked us to think about interiors, so I thought about our interior beings and how we often have many layers, and our layers are like onions peeling away, or like staircases where we just go deeper into some of the same things over and over again and revisit things. So I thought about working with the different dimensions within the glass sculpture, as well as the image. And Deirdre and the Cold Shop helped me tremendously with finishes in terms of how to project and see things in foreground and background. And it was all an experiment, and quite wonderful to see it actually projected and come together.
So I decided to make a piece of layer cake, and I'm a pretty literal person, so my choice of animation with that is a birthday cake and making wishes, blowing out candles. So then my idea was how to make it look like a layer cake with sheet glass and the different textures that happen between the cake and the frosting. So I chose to sandblast the cake part so it had more texture than the frosting part, looked more slick and wet. And then later I made my animation with the form already in mind to fit into here and kind of go with it.
It's really all about the artists that come to Pilchuck and what their interests are, and how they can drive the study of glass and the use of glass as artists and as individuals. And I think glass is kind of driving it itself. And I hope that Pilchuck will be able to embrace those interesting things that are happening for artists and allow them to teach classes about them so that, you know, other people who have those interests can come out of the woodwork and finally bring things together that they're interested in and see things in a new way.